welcome in. It's a Wednesday edition of Section 1904. We are here. John G is on vacation. And it's the first time I think we have a little bit of breaking news that we can really dive into. That Jackson Merrill and the San Diego Padres are in agreement on a 9-year, $135 million contract. This was news that was broken at 6 o'clock this morning on Wednesday by Robert Murray on the platform formerly known as Twitter, now known as X. The deal can max out at $204 million, includes a $30 million club option for a 10th season that can convert to a player option. I don't want to get lost in those details. I'm sure somebody will completely break down this contract. Usually there's plenty of reporters who have access to the players union or to the clubs or to the league, and they get all these details up there in a heartbeat. Bottom line is Jackson Merrill and the Padres are now in a commitment. They are no longer, just in an open relationship. This is now a committed relationship for 9 years, at least $135 million, John. This is something that you and I talked about, I think, right before opening day, maybe the day before opening day or opening day. I don't remember which it was, or maybe it was the day after opening day. It felt like it was imminent. I didn't feel comfortable using the word imminent because sometimes things can happen and you can hear things and you could sense things and you could feel things and then something changes, right? Something will completely change, but it did feel like something was lurking right around the corner here. So that they got it done by the end of the first homestand, I don't think is a surprise. I know we probably didn't go as far as maybe we could have on this subject when we first broached it. We sort of tiptoed around it a little bit. Maybe there was a curious social media post by one of us about this that could be interpreted in hindsight a certain way. But bottom line is Jackson Merrill is a San Diego Padre. We've talked a little bit about how you can't even see how high the ceiling is for him as a player, as a personality, as a fan favorite. You can't even see it at this point about how it just feels different inside of Petco Park. But wow, what a day for the Padres. What a day for Jackson Merrill. It's an incredible deal. I'm sure this will be the subject of much discussion, the deal that the Padres have signed with Merrill and what it might mean for other free agents or what it might mean for him or what his standing is inside of the players union. There's lots of different angles, but if you're a Padre fan, you don't really give a shit about any of that. You care that Jackson Merrill and the Padres are now in agreement and he will be a Padre through the time that he's already under control and now for years beyond that as well. What a day. What a signing.
What a day, what a signing. Darren, I'm probably going to play the opposite side of this for a lot of this podcast or a lot of this topic of the podcast, just because I think it's interesting to tackle this from both sides. But my initial thought when this came down was pretty simple. It's 2025, and I know you said in our first ever episode where we announced Section 1904, who knows if we're even going to be alive a year or two from now, right? It's 2025. The San Diego Padres have multiple superstars, and I'll include Xander Bogaerts and Manny Machado into this. They have 4 guys that in total, they're going to be paying about $100 million a year to, in Machado, Bogaerts, Tatis, and now Merrill. Through 2033. That's 8 years from now, Darren. For the next 8 years, this is I know when the Padres, they signed Manny Machado and then they signed Tatis to that long deal. I think the next year or 2 years later, Craig Elson and I did an episode where we were like, the old days of the old Padres are dead, right? And it felt like going into this season, it felt like those old days are trying to claw back in, right? They're afraid they can't sign the money for Jerks and Profar, and maybe they're going to ship guys out because they're afraid of the big. No, they have 3.5 legitimate superstars. They're paying $100 million a year for 4 superstars on their team. And this isn't even including the money for Yu Darvish or Nick Pivetta or Jake Cronenworth. That is a big league team. That's a big league payroll. They're probably going to be in the top 5, top 10 payroll for the next 7-8 years just as a result of paying this much to these guys. This is amazing. This to me feels like we don't have to worry about going back to the old times, the John Moore's days, the Jeffrey Morad days of the Padres are pinching pennies and whatever. This is really helpful and hopeful for the future of this franchise. So I don't want to skip that part. The optimism
good.
of it's,
I was
it's
wondering
a real
where this
good
was
team.
going because I felt like you were taking a contrarian opinion, and then everything you sort of suggested here was, wow, gone are the days where you would hesitate buying a jersey for a young player because you felt like it was inevitable that the young player was eventually going to get traded away to some other team in some other market.
Yeah, this is my contrarian part of this.
Okay, so but what's the but?
No, it's just like, look, I understand that the worst that this deal could possibly be is 9 years of Jackson Merrill at $15 million a year. Like $15 million a year is about what Jake Cronenworth makes or is worth, right? Like that is a steal for Jackson Merrill, no matter how you look at it. And yeah, it can go up depending on performance and at bats and where he lies in MVP races and all of that. But there's still some risk here. He has only played one full season of Major League Baseball. Like, we not long ago had concerns about like Fernando Tatis Jr., Cody Bellinger. What if these guys never return to form? What if he gets some horrific injury and never gets back to being this player? There is some level of risk for the Padres in this. It's a great deal. It's a fantastic deal. I do understand why the Union's a little upset about it, but how this shifts the market, I think, is maybe even better for the Union in that if players have a great first year, they're just going to turn around to their team and go like, I need that long-term deal now. We're not going to wait until year 4 when I've proven it. I need it now. And I feel like that could be helpful. I'm trying to be positive for the sake of the Union, but because if you just look at the dollars and cents of it, it's obviously a steal.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we should touch on that because it's not like the Union has said anything publicly. This is just sort of, at least not that I've seen, the Players Union, the MLB Players Union. But
every reaction to this is a steal of a deal. And usually when you get that, the Union's not far behind.
Right. You could sort of read between the lines, even on the way some people are framing the news, right? Like I could point you in the direction of a Jeff Passan post. What's it called? Like an X or I don't know. Anyway,
sure.
Yeah, and he said like, "Wow, the Padres are already 6-0 this week, and this might be the biggest win that they've had." Now, it doesn't suggest that it's not a good deal for the player,
right?
But I do think that this is that Jackson Merrill finds himself in a pretty elite group of players, John, that are young, and certainly that could maybe not find themselves in a conversation over the next 6-7 years. Where, they turn out to be Shohei Ohtani or they turn out to be Juan Soto. But, if he had different representation, let's say, maybe he would have representation like, Scott Boras type representation that would have said, no. Like, we need to maximize, our priority should be trying to figure out how to maximize your earning potential somewhere down the road. And a 9-year, $135 million, that ain't it. That just ain't it. Right, but that's not who represents him. He's represented by a group. And I asked some friends of mine in baseball who've been around baseball for a long time, who is KHG Sports Management? I even went to their website, KHG Sports Management. I've never heard of them. They have a rotating lineup of some of their clients. They have a picture of Jackson Merrill. Jackson Merrill is still wearing a Lake Elsinore Storm hat. I mean, he can't be more than 17 years old. I don't know who these other players are. There's somebody in a Red Sox hat, somebody in a Braves hat. I tried clicking on all the pictures. I don't really know who they are. It's KHG Sports. I don't know. They're in North Carolina. But, the point isn't to pick on them. That's not what I'm trying to do because I do think that there's something else worth pointing out here. It's that this is how unique this player is. That's how unique this player is. Yes. That, you might hear some grumbling. It's not going to surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise anybody else if you're going to get a bunch of unnamed agents and unnamed executives who are going to chime in on this deal and call it like a steal for the Padres and all that sort of stuff. Because Jackson Merrill is truly in a unique category of like young, exciting, marketable. We've talked about all of this on a local level. He's a guy I think that can break through on a national level as well. I do. I really believe that about Jackson Merrill, that he's got a ceiling that is so sky high that he is going to be a player that is going to break through on a national level, which is not something you say every day about a player that plays for the San Diego Padres. So, all of that sort of stuff I think is gonna happen. Here's the thing that I feel safe in saying about Jackson Merrill. He doesn't care or give a shit about any of that. This is where he wants to be. This is the team he wants to be with. These are some of the teammates that he wants to spend a bunch of time with. He doesn't say it. He means it. He loves it here. He wants to be a part of it. And he's just a dude. As somebody said to me earlier this morning, somebody who's around it all the time, like he is just a dude who loves it, who's not pretentious. And he doesn't now have to answer any questions about this stuff. He doesn't really care what anybody's going to say about whether he could have earned more money by waiting a year or 2 years or 3 years or waiting till free agency. He doesn't care about any of that sort of stuff. And fans should really rally around that. Not get too concerned that, oh man, but what if something goes wrong? Yeah, valid. You could say that about everybody, John. You could say that about every single player. You could say that about Manny Machado. He could do something today in a day game that will alter his career forever. But you're making I think a smart bet on a player just to say, this is the guy that we want to roll with. And he is also saying, you are the player, you are the guys that I want to roll with here as well. And I think fans should really appreciate that because, again, I do sort of sense that there's already, maybe it won't bubble to the surface out of respect for him, but I do get the sense some are going, really? Wow, okay, interesting. Maybe left some money on the table. Didn't feel like it was that important to him. He has meant everything that he has said. And I'm not saying this because I know him. Yeah. I just know people that are around it. And like, I think fans should really, if this were different circumstances, if there were some different people hanging around with Jackson Merrill, we're probably not at this point in time here on the first week of the baseball season in Jackson Merrill's second season in Major League Baseball, based on everything that we already know about him.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was thinking about, sometimes you'll be in a bar, there'll be some old guy around there going like, why is this player arguing for the extra $10 million? Like you're already getting 130. Like, why do you need 140, right? What's that $10 million going to do for you? And the answer is always the context, right? Your contract becomes an example for other players in the market of this is what this type of player is worth. This is why Scott Boras doesn't just say, let's get the most value for you. He's doing it because it also boosts the value of his other players that he has.
Correct.
Which is why it matters that Jackson Merrill is represented by someone who doesn't have other Major League Baseball players in their roster because they're like, this doesn't really affect us at all. And Jackson literally seems like the type of guy who's like, yeah, what's the difference? 130, 140, 150. Just give me the money and I can focus on the baseball and not worry about it. So he's actually the guy. He's actually like the old guy in the bar who's like, stop arguing over nickels and dimes, not realizing that like the person that the nickels and dimes really matter for is the agents and the other players. And I'm not going to say this is selfish. I actually think this is selfless of Jackson just going like, let's not worry about any of that. I just want to go and play baseball. And that's awesome. But yes, I imagine the other agents are probably furious with his agent. And I saw someone on Blue Sky saying, this reminded them of the Ronald Acuna deal, which was kind of under market. And then Ronald Acuna, I think within a year, had like fired his agent and moved on to a different agent. We'll see what happens with this, but it doesn't change the contract. They can't rip up the contract. He's with the San Diego Padres for the next 9-10 years of his career at the very least, and that is awesome. That is awesome. And let's just for a second tip our cap to John Seidler. Like, yes, it's a great deal, but to come in and in your first month with the team, you sign what appears to be a superstar to a 9-year 139, was it?
135.
Well, $135 million contract at its minimum that can go up to over $200 million over the next 9 years. And then you have, maybe a $30 million year at the end of it. That's awesome. And that removes a lot of fears that people had about John Seidler. So tip of the cap to John Seidler as well.
Yeah. And, again, I sort of get the sense, in terms of the timing, it was like, if we're not going to find this common ground here, then maybe it's something that's going to get put onto the back burner.
He'd be more expensive next year. Maybe maybe if he has another great year.
Yeah, but and it's also my understanding that this isn't something where you get the impression sometimes, John, that especially when it comes to Scott Boras clients, and I'm not a Boras basher. Anybody that's listened to the radio over the years knows I'm not a Boras basher. I'm not. I don't have any. I don't care that Juan Soto signed that kind of deal. If Juan Soto can go out there and get a $750 million deal from the New York Mets, well, good for him. It's not entirely all that different from what Manny Machado did when Manny Machado was a free agent and made it quite clear to everybody who would listen and every team that he was visiting that he was always going to go to the highest bidder. And when the Yankees said, well, we're probably not going to get you to that point, well, then the Yankees were off the list. The White Sox were off the list, right? And that's how we ended up in San Diego. And I don't feel like anybody should really run away from that. That's just a fact. That's just what led Manny Machado to the Padres. Now you get him into the building, and then there's the opt-out and all that other sort of stuff. And now Manny's really part of the fabric of the city, right? Isn't he? So, I don't begrudge anybody, who goes for the top dollar. Just because Tony Gwynn didn't do it doesn't mean that every other player for the rest of time has to do it the way Tony Gwynn did it.
Wait, so you hit a key point that I forgot I wanted to mention. Every 10 or 15 years, someone does this. A Tony Gwynn, a Jackson Merrill, someone else. And this is why everyone always says the San Diego discount. I don't think this is a San Diego discount. I think this is just a Jackson Merrill discount. But I don't know. I think for the next time they're trying to sign someone, I already saw someone comment on the post on section1904.com saying, this means that Cease is gone. This means that Arias is gone. This means that, Robert Suarez is gone. They're not going to be able to re-sign these players. And I continue to go back to, what about this team makes you think that they're scared to spend money? But B, I'm a little worried that at least the fan base is going to expect someone, let's use Dylan Cease as the best example. Fan base is now going to expect someone like Dylan Cease to take a San Diego discount because, hey, Jackson Merrill did it.
No, that's not going to happen. And he's also represented by Scott Boras.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
You know that going in. But to just finish, my thought is my understanding is it's not like this isn't going to be one of those situations, right? There's always the story that you could use, I guess, in politics, where after a bunch of people in England years ago voted for Brexit, and then the most common thing that was Googled the next day was, what is Brexit? Right? Even our own election cycle, there's been some elements of that as well. Jackson Merrill isn't going to wake up on Thursday or Friday of this week and be like, wait a minute, what did I sign? I understand, he was very clear-headed, involved and eyes wide open about what it was that, he was signing and what type of deal it was. And the rest of that stuff is just noise. And it's just going to be a bunch of noise. And none of that stuff is going to matter, even though you and I are sitting here going on almost 15 minutes about what some of the noise is going to be out there on the periphery. But, my understanding is he's not going to wake up and Google oh, wait a minute. I could have waited for a better, he's not going to do that sort of stuff. He's for his age, everybody who's been around him, and admittedly, I'm not really one of them. I have to rely on what it is that other people sometimes say to me, people that are in the clubhouse, people that are working for the team around baseball, etc. And again, I do have some friends who, poked some fun at his agents this morning on a text message.
Sure.
But none of that matters to Jackson Merrill, and that's the most important part. He's going to block all that noise out. He's not going to sit here and be like, I don't see a situation where he's gonna do what Ronald Acuna did and sign a deal and be like, wait a second, what the fuck? What? Nobody told me this. Maybe. But I just, all accounts that I've heard about him is he's a dude. He gets it, and he was well aware, he was involved, and it wasn't something like he's like, hey man, you just got to talk to my agent. This is something that almost happened last year before the season started. I think the ownership stuff was probably interfering a little bit with the process. That's the way I understood it last year, and I said it on the radio, so this is not something I'm just saying on Section 1904. But I think that the ownership situation might have gotten in the way of this happening a year ago. But now this time things are a little bit more settled. You pointed out rightly that John Seidler, whether he's exciting on television or will put you to sleep, there is a level of stability here that didn't exist a year ago. And I think that absolutely factored in. And you're right. Yeah. I mean, Luis Arias is coming off the books at $14 million. And so is Cease at $14 million. And maybe Michael King. And you know who else is coming off the books? Eric Hosmer after this year. $12 million more. Maybe Robert Suarez. So I'm not too worried. I don't know that Jackson Merrill, you could say, well, what's this a priority for? He was under control. Aren't there other things? Those guys are months away. You saw what Garrett Crochet signed for.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not getting Cesar King. you're not getting that done.
No.
You're not. Like, those guys would kind of be crazy at this point, unless you put a deal on the table that was so good that you just couldn't say no. But Jackson Merrill's in a totally different category. And again, John, if I'm a fan, and by the time people listen to this, the game will probably have already started. We're recording at 11-ish, somewhere around there. Game's at 1 o'clock today. We already talked about how popular he was in this fan base, and it's anecdotal evidence. Oh, well, like, these people near me stood up and applauded. But, I'm telling you, I don't even know how high the ceiling is for this player. I feel like Manny's sort of maxed out at his level of popularity already. Like, Manny kind of has kind of peaked there. Maybe Tatis has another level to go, but how much more popular can Fernando Tatis Jr. get? How much more popular can he get here in San Diego? Maybe, if he goes ahead and wins an MVP and continues to perform at the level where he's performing, you can make that case. But I feel like Manny's kind of maxed out, and not in a bad way, because, it's at such a high level. And then, like, maybe Tatis has a couple of more rungs. But with this guy, I don't even know how high it's going to go in terms of what he potentially is bringing to the city, the club, et cetera, and, to himself, just based on his own unique personality and, the meteoric rise of Jackson Merrill in this market. I mean, again, with no stink on him whatsoever, never been surly, no trouble, never been suspended or any of that. I mean, I don't know. I find it hard to put into words where exactly Jackson Merrill is going to be popularity wise over the next couple of years.
So we've added some context to this conversation, but I like to also look at things without some context, right? And before the season, I think I brought this up the other day. Before the season, the Padres announced their opening day roster, and I saw a bunch of people going like, "This team's not good enough to win it all," and oh god, like I can't believe they're going into the season with Diaz and Maldonado as their catcher. Do they not want to win? The team's 6-0 now, as of this recording. Like you said, there's another game in about an hour and a half that will either take them to 6-1 or 7-0. Then they play the Cubs, who I'm not really afraid of, and the Oakland Sacramento Athletics, who I'm definitely not afraid of. And we'll talk about if it means anything.
Did you say Oakland Athletics?
I said Oakland Sacramento Athletics.
Did you see that press conference that they had in a shed?
No. I saw the complaints about how bad the stadium is with the number of people that they have going into it. How you just someone was saying you're actually you're getting crushed by the crowd because there's so many people there. I think people want to see it. They haven't seen an MLB team in a minor league stadium in quite some time.
Do you ever drive by a Home Depot and you see they're usually selling those kind of sheds that you put on the side of your house, like a tough
is that
shed?
what they did? That's what they were in?
That's where they were having their press conferences. That's where they were dragging the managers. And I guess there was some windstorm there on opening day, and the whole thing was just shaking like a leaf. It felt like it was going to get swept up into a tornado. Like, oh, wow, what a great start. Anyway, sorry.
That's amazing. No, you're good. But I want to remove the context. And I've been saying this for years on social media. Padre fans have to stop comparing the Padres to the Dodgers. They just have to. For the sake of sanity, they just have to. If I just asked you, the Dodgers don't exist in this question. If I just asked you, hey, for the next 5 years, I'm just doing 5 years. For the next 5 years, you have a team that has Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, Jackson Merrill, throw in there Xander Bogaerts if you want. We know they're probably going to have a capable pitching staff. They always do. We know the bullpen's always going to be good. It always is. You would assume that team would have at least one really great run through the playoffs in 5 years, right? That's a team that has enough superstar talent that we've seen perform in October that you would assume success there. And I feel like instead of people being like, this is one of the best Padre teams we've ever seen and we should appreciate it and enjoy it and all of that, it's a lot of well, they're nothing compared to the Dodgers. And this goes into your conversation with Richard Deitch that we posted yesterday, which is the Dodgers are playing a different financial game than the Padres, and because of that, I understand they're in the same division. You play a lot of games against them. If you want to win the division, you have to win more games than them. I understand all of that. But, we have wild cards and things can happen. I don't want to ignore how good this team is and how good I think it will be over the next few years with all of these pieces signed long-term, hopefully getting better and improving and developing. Like you said, we don't even know what Jackson Merrill's ceiling is. We don't even really know what Tatis's ceiling is. So much could happen. And all you need to do to enjoy it is just not pay attention to the Dodgers unless the Padres are playing against them.
So let me ask you a question, because you're usually dialed in on things like this. How much more valuable is Jackson Merrill's bobblehead today than it was when they gave him out Monday night at Petco Park?
I mean, he was already going to be here for what's team control? 7 years?
6.
Is it 6? So he was already going to be here for 5 more years. Now he's here for 9 more years. He's got a bigger contract. I don't know. I think it's going to be tied to, like, you know, the whole thing in his contract where it's like the contract gets bigger. The final year switches from club option to player option if he finishes top 5 in MVP voting. I think if that happens, he finishes top 5 in MVP voting, I think the value of the bobblehead probably skyrockets. But I don't know. Everyone knows how good Jackson Merrill has been over the last year. I don't think this contract changes that at all. So
okay. Well, I just felt if you were sitting on one of those, I don't know, maybe put it into storage and see what you got in a couple of years. Not bad. Not a bad day when you can go from $809,000 a year to $135 million guaranteed.
That's what I was going to say. Like this is probably Jackson's dream, right? His dream is to not only make the majors, be an MLB ball player, but have like a contract that has 9 digits on it. Like that's I know it's not top dollar for a center fielder, but that's got to be a dream for some of these kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of baseball players, that they do kind of become a brand, right? Like there is a level of branding for professional athletes. I don't want to just limit this to baseball players, but especially in the era of social media, you do become a bit of a brand. Cristiano Ronaldo is a player who stands out to me, right? He has more Instagram followers, and people will laugh at this, but still, he has more Instagram followers and social media currency than any of the teams that he's played for. And he's played for Manchester United and Real Madrid. So, you know, it's not like he's played for a bunch of teams that you never heard of, like the team he's playing for now. But these guys become their own corporations, like even on a local level. You might have seen a story in the offseason that Fernando Tatis Jr. is signed with Bad Bunny's agency. So, Tatis is going to be, big into the marketing game and all that sort of stuff. And hey, if you can produce on the field and you can produce off the field, credit to you. Like, good on you if you can do that sort of stuff, right? And you can have a social media presence and you can become a brand. Yeah. That's like what the big time athletes are. It's not enough to be an athlete anymore, to put up statistics and go to all-star games. You also got to be a brand. When Alex Morgan came to town, Alex Morgan was a brand.
Yeah.
She was a phenomenal soccer player who was, towards the tail end of her career, obviously, but Alex Morgan was a brand. We never had an athlete like Alex Morgan come to San Diego before. Not everybody fully understood that, but Alex Morgan's footprint was just bigger because of the sport that she played and because of the competitions that she's been in than some of the other players. And, all of this is a long-winded way of saying, I honestly don't know that Jackson Merrill really cares about the brand stuff. I think Jackson Merrill is such a throwback. Everything that you hear, and it's subject to change because he's 21, and how many of us had so many twists and turns in our lives. But everybody's been around. It's like, the guy he just is a player. Like, he just wants to ball. And the idea that you're putting a 9-figure contract in front of him, John, to your point, I think does matter. I think it does. I think if he was driven by things other than, I just want to put my eye black on and just go run around a baseball field and be with my guys in the clubhouse, then we're not having this conversation. Because it would be easy to say, dude, listen to people in your union. You're a special player. There's only so many of you that come across our union every once. True unicorns of the sport. And you are in that category. For a young player with only a season under your belt, you are a unicorn that might be somebody who we're going to hold up as a union to help us elevate and change. He's like, I'm good. I'm good with this. Thanks. I just want to put my eye black on. And I just want to go run around Petco Park. And I do believe that. Again, it sounds naive. I'm not, I've never even really met him. But, I do believe that's what drives him.
I have several questions to bounce off of that. One, and I'm going to throw all of them at you that I can remember. One, he doesn't care about the brand. I feel like also like there's I
get the Merrill Madness stuff,
No, but there's a context here that I need to let other people in on, which is you and I for years, if not a decade, have been joking about how terrible a face for baseball Mike Trout has been. Like, Mike Trout is the guy who does not give the shit about the brand, right? He just wants to get there and play baseball, and he just wants to try and help his team win. And like sometimes those guys are bad for the brand, to be the face of the franchise and all of that. This is an interesting thing that I thought of while you were saying that, though, which is this is exactly the type of guy that a team wants to empower into a locker room leadership position, right? We were joking about in spring training, he had this whole thing where, I'm going to stay through the whole game because I'm still young. I haven't earned it like the veterans who leave in the middle of the... I wonder how much of this is the Padres going like, we want to give you a bunch of money so that you have as big of a voice in the locker room as Tatis, as Machado, as Bogarts, as Darvish. You can walk around and go, I got one of those contracts too. I'm a superstar too. And I think you need to be busting your ass more. I think you need to show up earlier. I think you need to practice more. Like, I wonder how much of this is the Padres trying to, not to Eric Hosmer this, but trying to empower him to be a culture guy in the locker room, which he couldn't do at 21 years old, making however much money you said, $800,000.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's part of it. You know, I do think it was strategic that they brought him up last year when they did, because part of it was, okay, we need to open up the window and air this place out because we have a bunch of like old guy smell in here, like old player personality, not old in terms of ends of their careers, but we needed to air this place out. This was a bunch of dudes with contracts. Tatis had a long-term deal. Soto was going for a long-term deal. Xander came in with a big deal, which everybody's sort of scratched their heads going, what is this? Yeah. What? Another guy. No, I'm not going to blame him for taking the biggest contract.
No.
Somebody put it on the table. I probably would have done the same. As a matter of fact, I've done the same where I've signed for money before. So yeah. I can't be too hypocritical and start judging people for doing that. Hosmer signed it. So like there was just that, there was that sort of, there was that waft in the air that it was all about contracts, players and contracts, and who had theirs and who didn't get theirs. Josh Hader factored into that. Josh Hader looked around. Somebody told me Josh Hader looked around and was like, you want to know why I don't go an extra inning? Because you people have paid Drew Pomerantz a bunch of money. You people have paid Robert Suarez a bunch of money when he really hasn't done anything in Major League Baseball. Now that contract I think has worked out.
Yeah,
but,
it has.
His whole point was like, you're asking me now this close to free agency to blow out, give you an extra inning and do some things here that might be detrimental to my career when you've paid all these other people around here and it was like that was the aroma from the clubhouse of 2023. So when they opened up the window, they also cleared some of it out, right? Josh Hader, off he went, traded Juan Soto.
Yep.
And part of it was we need to bring in the energy of Jackson Merrill. We need to bring in somebody here who's not going to be driven by these kind of things, who's not just here because he's a business.
Yeah, guy cares more about baseball than business.
He's a baller.
Yeah.
And like you're right. Like I think it is easy to kind of be like, he's so like young and excitable. He's like, I'm just here for my dogs, And like it is funny, and maybe it's because I've been around it for 20 years, 25, whatever. It is funny, but not like in a make fun of him kind of way. It's just like,
charming. It's charming.
There is a charm to it. You're like, yeah, okay, dude. Like, I love it. Like you don't get that, and you didn't get that from a couple seasons ago. And I hate constantly talking about 2023, but like it is important to explain how you end up in a situation like this, because I think we talked about it on here and radio. That like the future is much more, I think, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jackson Merrill,
100%.
Than it is Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts. Now, in a sliding doors universe, there was a chance that this could have been, I don't know, maybe the idea once upon a time was that it could be Soto and Tatis.
Yeah.
But then, things happen. So we don't need to relive every last second of that. But that was a thought. That was definitely a thought that Manny was approaching an opt-out, and Manny was definitely going to opt out, and Peter was willing to spend some money. So maybe this was, and, then all of a sudden out of no place, here comes Xander, and that just, like, it made everything muddy. And then everything became about money in that clubhouse. And it wasn't just Soto, for as much as people want to blame Soto. I mean, I find that really, really short-sighted. There were other people in there. Blake Snell was approaching free agency.
I remember every single Musgrove start was followed up with an AC tweet or write-up about how this was going to affect his contract value going into his free agent year. I was like, I'm sick of talking about the money. Can we talk about the pitcher?
Right. But, those guys, they all knew the free agency was around. By the way, those are also arguably the 3 best performers that the team had that season, right?
Yeah.
So, it was a real thing.
Yeah.
But, there was a flip side of it, which was everything in that clubhouse just became about money. Players who got paid felt defensive. Players who didn't get paid felt like, they weren't appreciated. So anyway,
I want to.
The point is, when you were airing the place out, a huge part, like the tonic, the air, the tree. I'm trying to think. What's the name of the little tree that you get at the car wash place?
The air freshener. The air freshener
was like Jackson Merrill. You know what I mean? It really was a big part of that. You can tell me addition by subtraction all you want, but new manager clearly set a different tone, which is, what a manager should be doing. But part of that also is here's this guy. We feel like this guy's pretty special. We're not rolling the dice on him. One thing I learned last year, John, was when you say when you would go up to Padre players, when you would see somebody, or not players, when you would see an executive in the elevator at Petco Park, I'm being very specific here, but I won't mention any names. And you'd be like, wow, you guys have got to be, I can't believe, you must, even you guys must be shocked by how well Merrill's performing. And they look at you do you think this is a fucking accident? You know what I mean? You'd be like, oh, they'd be like, no, if we didn't believe in him, we wouldn't have done this. We wouldn't have done this if we didn't believe that he could handle it. Did we know that he was going to be this guy that popped in after the 8th inning and 9th inning and had all these dramatic moments? How can you predict that? But when you would say that sort of stuff, and I wasn't the only one, sometimes they look at you and be like, yeah, dude, we didn't just pull a name out of a hat. We really believe that this could be a player who not only, could contribute in a way, and they thought he'd just bat 7th, 8th, 9th for the whole season. But they also felt like he was, a guy makeup wise who was going to help change the culture of the team. And it's a risk. It's a risk when you have veteran players in there like Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts, right? I mean, that's a little bit of a risk, but they believed in him. And I know I'm not the only one that was on the receiving end of those kind of conversations when you'd say, man, even you guys got to be surprised. They'd be like, hey, let's, it's a 800 OPS, but no, if we didn't think he could do some stuff at this level, we wouldn't have done it.
To slam home that point, I want to go back in a second, because you said that they were maybe even talking about this at this point last year or before last season, which
I
would
think
have been
last spring training.
That would have been before he even made his MLB debut.
Correct.
Which makes me feel better about including the John Singleton story as a part of the story on section1904.com, because it's that would have been almost the exact same thing. But before we get into that, pop quiz for you, Darren Smith. On the Padres active roster, and you can even include everyone on the injured list currently, there are 2 players who were drafted by the San Diego Padres. 2. Can you name them?
Obviously, we're talking about one of them.
Yep, that's one.
I think this is also an interesting point, and it's not something that everybody, and I am filibustering here, like Cory Booker. Drafted. Let's see. Maura Hohnwooden, he was signed. So
he was signed.
Drafted.
He is still technically a developmental win. I was looking at this as a developmental win. But,
I'm going to say on the 40-man roster.
I'm going active. I'm not going 40-man.
Okay, so that's not Camposano.
Correct.
Who am I missing here?
He was drafted in 2021. He is 26 years old. He's a pitcher.
Okay.
Fairly new to the team. Yeah, fairly new to the team. Throws a funky looking ball.
I give. Who is it? Is it
Alec Jacob?
Alec Jacob. Okay.
So another reason that they wanted to sign Merrill to this, I guarantee you, was because this is a huge developmental win. Like I have been saying for all of the time that I have been covering this team, whether it's Padres Hot Tub, Mighty 1090, whatever, section1904.com, that the Padres desperately need developmental wins that they can be like, we drafted this guy, we developed this guy, he turned into a superstar, and he spent his career here. And Tatis is kind of that. But they traded for Tatis. That was the James Shields trade, right?
Sure.
So you could be like, well, they didn't necessarily find him, the blah, blah, blah. It's technicality. I think Tatis counts. But Merrill is the cut and dry. We scouted this guy. We drafted this guy. We developed this guy. He turned into a superstar. We signed him long-term. Maybe he spent his whole career here. You want those guys, and you want to highlight those guys, and you want to build around those guys, because the next time you draft someone, you could be like, hey, you could be the next Jackson Merrill. You really work out here. You could spend your whole career here getting paid, being a superstar, fans loving you, all that stuff. That's really important stuff. Should we talk about the team outside of Jackson Merrill, though?
I do agree with you. Just to jump in on the end of your thought there, and I think Manny is a really popular player, and Tatis is really popular, and neither one of those players were drafted and developed. I mean, Tatis, I guess, was developed, but ultimately, I do think, as a matter of personal preference, if you're asking me, some fans will say, I don't really give a shit. Just get me. Like Shohei Ohtani wasn't drafted and developed by the Dodgers, and he's the most popular player on planet Earth, right? Yeah. So, I think that there's always an argument for that. But, I think there's a sense of pride, let's say, for the New York Yankees that they drafted Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
And that Aaron Judge came up through their system, and that Aaron Judge could have been selected by a bunch of other teams, right? I'm guessing he was drafted somewhere in the same neighborhood as Jackson at the end of the first round. Aaron Judge might have actually been drafted in the second round out of Fresno State. Now, I think
that might be right, because he was so big. Yeah,
I do think that it ultimately, if you can get a player like that via trade, via free, you'll take him however you can get him. But for me, as a matter of personal preference, if you're asking me, like, I always love the draft and developed guys. I just do. I do. Like, I think that you have, as a fan, and not everybody follows minor league baseball. You all should be supporting our friends at Mad Friars, by the way.
Yep.
But not everybody does. But I do think, like, when you've invested and, you're one of these dudes who sits around, like these dorks who sit around and watch the baseball draft, and then, like, all of a sudden you're searching YouTube for video, you feel like you've invested years of your life in watching these players come up through Fort Wayne or come up through Lake Elsinore. And, maybe you've even visited some of these places, or you're a Padre fan who's been relocated to a different part of the country. And you could be like, yeah, I saw that guy when he was in Lake Elsinore. I do think there is something that's still that has a certain level of charm associated with it. Again, it's not the be all end all, but I think for a lot of baseball fans, they just like it. Like, they just prefer that, to have followed a guy's career from the time that he was selected all the way through all the bus rides. You just feel like there's a level of ownership with that you can't get with other kinds of players.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And it's one of those things where it's like the Padres and Jackson Merrill have had a relationship since he was probably 17 years old, maybe even before that.
And maybe it matters in a situation like this because he doesn't feel like he's just a piece, right? He doesn't feel like he was just a name in a trade. He doesn't feel like he was just somebody, who's been through the business side of the sport.
Yeah.
He's like, this is all I know, and I'm good saying this is all I really want to know.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, very, very happy about it. It's a very good day to be a San Diego Padres fan.
And the team is they're off to a 6-0 start. And, I will say one of the things that I found myself worrying or wondering about was, would there be a little bit of a hangover from 2024, the postseason, how it ended, like having the psychological warfare of the Dodgers constantly telling you that you blew it, right? Like, you blew it. Yes. Yeah. We had no starting pitching and you guys couldn't close us down. And when are you going to get that opportunity again? I did worry about that, just the psychological aspect of it, but I have to say, through the first 6, unless they're looking up at the standings and being like, man, we're off to the best start in franchise history, and the Dodgers can't really lose either. Yeah. But I don't get the sense that that's what they're all about. They're just managing their business and handling their business, and they've been fun to watch. And, you can say what you want about the Braves. You can say what you want about Cleveland. These are, I don't think they're bad teams.
They're playoff teams.
Maybe the season will prove that wrong. But, I mean, to start the season, you look at it and be like, yeah, that's going to be a interesting homestand. And the Padres have, imagine starting 7-0 and going and hitting the road.
This is just so much fun. And I hope the guys are having fun. B, if you've watched the games, it's really obvious that the Padres are also getting every bounce. Like every bit of luck is going the Padres' way. Just refer to the, I think it was the Jake Cronenworth double where it went off the pitcher's foot and rolled into the dugout, and somehow that was a ground rule double. They're just getting every bounce. Every decision that the coaches are making is working. I don't know if this is as good as they can possibly be, but I thought about you and the whole, like, are they going to have a hangover? And I actually think that's part of what's motivating the offense is they spent all offseason being told and hearing they couldn't score. They couldn't score. They couldn't score. The Dodgers really shut down their offense. They couldn't score. They seem motivated. They seem hungry. And it's interesting to me because it seems like I before the season I said I'm interested to find out what the identity of this team is. And it seems to be a similar identity to last year. But I forget who it was. Someone was giving an interview. One of the players was giving an interview. Maybe it was even during a game. And they said, Schulte says we want to win the run game. They were talking about the catchers. I think it was a pitcher talking about the catchers. And he was like, Maldonado and Diaz, Schulte had a focus on we are going to win the run game every game. And it's interesting that meant two sides of it, right? We are going to run like hell, but we're also going to have catchers that make it really hard to run on us. And that it felt like take last year's identity of like, we're not just going to get guys on base, but we're going to have high batting average guys, high contact guys. We're not going to focus on the power and the launch angle as much. We're just going to make contact. And now they've added to that. We're going to make contact, but we're going to get guys on base and they're going to be moving all the time. It's really interesting and it feels like early 90s baseball, but it's also great to watch and they're having great success with it. And at some point they're going to slump, right? They're not going 162-0. They might lose today. But so far, what they have put together really seems to work and it makes more sense than it did on paper. Like even Jason Hayward playing left and kind of sharing those responsibilities with Lockridge, who can fill in for Merrill if Merrill ever needs a breather in center, makes more sense than what we thought left field was going to look like. The catching situation, now that you see it in practice and Diaz and Maldonado aren't like complete zeros at the plate, you're like, I get it. I get what they were going for, why they were going for it, and it seems to be working. Now, professional sports are games of adjustments, right? At some point, people are going to adjust to what the Padres are doing. At some point, Nick Pivetta standing on the opposite side of the mound the hitters are going to see that. They're going to get used to it and they're going to start hitting him again. By the way, we had someone who reached out say the person that Pivetta reminded them of was Matt Latos.
That's interesting because I asked a friend of mine who works for the Padres. I said, am I missing, like, who is it? And he said Latos as well. I said, I figured it out later. It was Mike Mussina. Now, the arm slot's totally different, but what I was more focused on was the way the jersey fit and the hop off the mound after the curveball.
Oh, I like that.
So I don't know how many people remember Mike Mussina or are inclined to go to YouTube and watch Mike Mussina video. The arm slot's totally different. Pivetta comes over the top.
Yeah, Mussina was 3/4, right?
Yeah, he was more 3/4. Incredible that he generated that much power. He was such a good pitcher.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it was the hop afterwards, setting yourselves defensively, that Mussina was so recognizable. And I thought I saw some of that with Pivetta. But yes, to your point, somebody with the team actually said to me that they thought it was Latos.
So anyway, back to the offense. Do you feel like there's any of that Dodger thing that sunk in, like they got offended by how much everyone was talking about they couldn't score for this many innings, and now they're like, we're just going to shut them up. We're going to be an awesome offense. And how like it's all the decisions that were made for the opening day roster are kind of crystallizing and making more sense now, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I do believe in that sometimes. I think it's hard in baseball to carry over whatever it is that happened at the end of one season into the next season.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of hard to make predictions on the way things end, right? That things end a certain way and therefore they're going to pick up a different way. But I do maybe believe in that having to hear how they, I thought it might be processed as, man, we had this golden opportunity. They're messing with us. They're teasing us. They're rubbing our noses in it by saying like, oh man, like they were better. Because how many times are you really going to say that? Even today, even after this great start, I don't know that many people would be willing to commit to that today, but it'll change. And I do think maybe that was the motivation of like, man, of all the things we did last year, of all the ways that we could have lost to the Dodgers, 24 scoreless innings would have been one of the ways that nobody could have predicted.
Yeah.
So, I do think maybe Darren Tripp pointed this out. The Padres through 6 kind of look like the Padres through the second half of last year. And, maybe sometimes, there is that connection. So, I hope so. I'd love to know that is fuel. I'd love to know that is something, that they processed in a way that was different than how I worried they would process it. Right.
Yeah.
So
who was the DH for most of the second half last year? It was a Rise for most of it, right?
Yeah, they had different guys out there. Sometimes, like Peralta would be out there, and I think they, one of the things that Schilt did is he kind of used it more as the
day off,
get a guy off his feet. Manny did it a lot during the beginning of the season. Remember
when he was hurt,
Manny couldn't play.
Yeah.
So, it was advantageous for Manny to get himself off his feet for a little bit. Arise did it, I think, when he got here second half. Although, I know everybody talks and knocks his defense, but
he's been good.
Yeah, he's dug a couple balls out there. They are a well-coached team. It doesn't feel like they're a well-drilled team when it comes to pitching, when it comes to hitting. It really, running bases, you talked a little bit about their focus. Rarely ever are the days where you could ever say, the Padres could get beat, but can you think of many games where they really beat themselves?
No,
really.
And actually, the Tatis thing, it was less like this last year, but before his suspension and everything, it kind of felt like this, and it feels like this again for me. When Tatis gets on first, it's just a double. You just assume he's going to steal second, and that's like, I haven't felt that in a really long time. I guess Tatis before the suspension, but before that, it was like, I can't remember someone who was like, he gets a walk or a single, and you're like, well, he's going to be on second in a couple pitches. So I don't know. It's just a really fun team to watch and root for. And the reason I asked about the DH was I think having Gavin Sheets playing as well as he is, hitting as well as he is, matters a lot for this lineup. It's something that they didn't really have last year in terms of like a lefty kind of thumper. And you might know this better than me. Gavin Sheets a couple years ago was thought to be like a can't miss prospect for the White Sox.
I think so. That sounds right.
And then he was just terrible. Like for 4 years, they kept giving him shots, and he was just terrible. And I know White Sox fans were like, they've totally whiffed on this guy. And it's the Jurickson Profar of it all. It's the Jorge Alfaro of it all. AJ Preller has found a guy once thought to be very good, then played in MLB and thought to be not good, and then he comes over to the Padres and somehow finds a way to reach the potential that he could never reach with the White Sox. Now, granted, we're 6 games in. This could all change. But I think there's a real possibility here that Gavin Sheets, who at some point, if I haven't already, I'm going to slip and call him Andy Sheets, has discovered the player he was supposed to be. At least in terms of hitting, which, again, would be a huge win for AJ Preller and the Padres.
Yeah, these are early season observations at the very finest. Yeah, it is April 2nd, and I always go back to doing radio with Tim Flannery, where, you'd see somebody who has 10 home runs in April. He'd just look at you and go, April Fools. April does fool. It will fool you as well. Manny Machado, 51 games starting DH. Arise 46, Solano 21, Peralta 13, Bogarts 9, Profar 8, Cronenworth 5, Graham Pauly, remember him 4, Tatis 4. So, they did spread it around a little bit there. They did spread it around in terms of who was going to start where. Some of that was necessity with Manny Machado and the injury and such. So, yeah, it's real easy to sit and say, in a week's time, having done 1 million hours of sports talk radio in my life, the Padres go on the road this weekend.
Could be totally different.
And, they all of a sudden it's like, God, they just took advantage of a Braves team where there's some sort of turmoil. And that's the way the sport is. It's so cliche, but it is so up and down. But, with Merrill and Tatis performing and the Stars performing on a level where Manny's injury wasn't much, right? The whole cramp thing.
I was worried about that, and when Tatis got the ball, he didn't catch it, but he knocked it from being a home run back into the field and turned it into a double, and then Olsen never came around to score. I think that was the 1-0 win, so Tatis really kind of saved the game. and he was holding his wrist for like the remaining innings. And I was like, oh, great. I was like, after this game, it's going to be Tatis broke his wrist and Manny tore his ACL or whatever. No, they were both in the lineup the next day. Totally fine.
Yep.
Like, that's
take
huge.
Some precautions early in the year, right? And then at the Cubs, and it'll be the Cubs opening weekend, so that place will be on fire. What a place. And then at the Athletics, they get to go up and play in Sacramento, which is amazing. And then they come home and it's the Rockies and the Cubs. So, the next couple of weeks here, there's nothing that you look at and be like, okay, well, that's the real test. It's things are going well. Things are going well. Like our sports market is going well. SDFC is going to host Seattle Sounders back-to-back home games at Snapdragon Stadium. They signed a player, Milan Olaski, who I remember from the USL. I remember him banging in goals against San Diego Loyal. He's a San Diego product. He's an Escondido kid who's been playing in Denmark for the last couple of seasons. Scored a bunch of goals. San Diego State got Magoon Guath.
I was going to say.
To kind of commit to returning.
What is that? How do you get him to say, I'm not going anywhere else unless I go to the NBA? Like, that's such a strange. What did they give him for that?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he just didn't like what was out there. I feel like I don't appreciate Magoon Guath as much as some other people locally do, and that's not that I think he's bad. I just don't feel like you could sense the relief when he posted on Instagram that he was going to come back. If he wasn't going to turn pro, this is a San Diego State basketball player for those that don't follow college hoops.
Yeah.
And, he had announced that he was going to enter the transfer portal or turn pro. And now he's amended that to, well, I will come back to San Diego State if I don't turn pro.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked at a mock draft, so I don't know if anybody's going anywhere, if his name's on any of these mock drafts. He was the freshman of the year in the Mountain West Conference. I feel like I just don't have an appreciation because, the celebration of him returning, like if Kawhi Leonard had said that, we all felt like, that's Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
If he had said, I'm changing my mind, I'm going to come back. I watched so much of Kawhi that I was like, I would have thought, oh man, that's an incredible moment for the Aztecs. And I think this is good. I don't think it's bad.
No, it's
obviously,
not bad.
You're not second team All Mountain West. You're not the Mountain West Freshman of the Year or Newcomer of the Year, whatever they call it, because you're a bad player. But, and the people who followed it closer than I did seem to think this is a really big deal. So, I have to defer to their opinions on this sort of stuff.
I need to look this up again. Oh, okay. So ESPN has slightly different numbers. So Magoon Guath is listed at 7 feet tall. Do you know how many pounds?
He's a thin guy, right?
Yeah. So ESPN has him listed at 205. I swear I saw something maybe on the SDSU website that had him at 195. And I was like, if you are 7 foot tall and your weight starts with a 1, you have no chance of making it in the NBA. Like, that's...
How much did Kevin Durant weigh when he was in college? I realize I'm putting him in an impossible stratosphere here.
That's a good point. What does Kevin Durant weigh now is a better question, because I don't know if I can look up what his weight was 15 years ago.
Right, but he's thin, and it looks like he can put on a little bit of weight.
He's listed at 6'11", 240. And I don't know. I've seen.
He was rail thin coming out of Texas, though.
I know, and he was probably closer to like 220. But like this is like Bull. Like I think Bull is like 7'5", but Bull is like 7'5", 225. But like Magoon is kind of and Bull is a great player when he plays. Like he's very efficient on offense, but he gets really pushed around on defense, which he can kind of make up for with his height. But like, you just can't. I saw a story this week. Someone, I think this was on Blue Sky, some random person was talking about how they were playing like rec league basketball 25, 30 years ago. And Marshawn Lynch walked in flip-flops and basically destroyed everyone. And because no one could move him, he would just park his ass in the paint, demand the ball, slowly push his way towards the hoop, and then turn around and throw it in. And they were like, you just can't stop him because he's an immovable object. Magoon Guath might be the opposite of that. So if he comes back to San Diego State, I imagine there's going to be a big effort to put some weight on that man.
I would think so. I would think you probably get some NIL money there, maybe get him going with some Sammys.
Yeah.
Put on a couple of pounds there.
Pizza before the game. Pizza.
The people who follow the program and have followed it this year and who have watched many, many more games than I have feel like this is a really big deal. So I'm gonna defer to them on this being a really big deal for San Diego State. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, be on the lookout for a new SDFC midweek live. This week we will interview. Let's see. I interviewed Paddy McNair from the north of Ireland, number 17, center back for SDFC. He was an enjoyable fella. John, you'll get a kick out of this. Paddy McNair debuted when he was 19 years old, okay, with Manchester United.
Yeah.
I will use some of my show material here on Section 1904. He debuted in 2014 with Manchester United. He got a start. They had an injury crisis there. Louis van Gaal was the manager of United at the time. Here are the names. You'll know some of these names.
Yep.
On September 27, 2014, the starting 11 for Manchester United. David De Gea was in goal.
Yep. No.
You know that name.
I do.
Luke Shaw, Marcus Rojo,
Yes.
Raphael, and Paddy McNair. That was your back line.
Okay.
They played kind of a 4-1-3-2. Daley Blind was sort of controlling midfielder. Angel Di Maria, who I think is still playing somewhere, who won a World Cup with Argentina and Messi a couple years ago. Wayne Rooney, who got red carded in this game. Ander Herrera, Robin Van Persie, and Falcao. That was the starting 11 the day that Paddy McNair made his debut. He played for Manchester United, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, and West Brom, 4 clubs that were all started in the 1800s. One of the things I asked, you played for some of the most legendary clubs, some of the most historic clubs in the world, and now you're on a first-year team? Like, what is that adjustment like? So he was great. Sal Zizzo joins us, and you'll hear a conversation with Mikey Varas. So excited as we get later into the week, trying to track down an interview with Tyler Heaps, the sporting director, so we can talk about bringing home Milan Olaski. He's a pretty good player. I mean, he scored a bunch of goals in USL, which is not the same as scoring in Europe. I don't think he had I didn't watch enough to know exactly what his role was there. I think just a couple of goals in Europe. But, as we saw with Alex Mighton, and I interviewed Alex Mighton too, he was great. He was so good. That'll be on the pregame show. He's an interesting dude, man.
I have a question, and It's okay if you don't have an answer to this. But as you know, I'm on vacation. I'm out of town. I might be busy tonight when the coach's show is on. Is there a podcast somewhere of this that I could listen? Okay, great. So I can search
It's
for
always available on demand on the iHeart app.
Fantastic. I'm going to go. Oh, I have the iHeart app. I'm going to go find it on the iHeart app and listen to it probably on the way back home.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great first home win. There's nothing else you can say about it with LAFC and the big club and everything that we talked about. And now you have another club that feels like it's a big club as well.
Yeah.
I'm actually excited to watch the CONCACAF Champions Cup tonight, Wednesday night. It's Inter Miami is at LAFC at 8:30. I thought about going to that game. I know a few people with LAFC. I was like, hey, is the press box full? I sort of like
very.
I might be willing to drive up there to watch Inter Miami, and Messi traveled and Suarez traveled. So I think they're expected to play. But LAFC, like we talked about, wanting to be a big club, and SDFC definitely feels like it's a big club. They want to be a big club too, but they're just getting off the ground 6 matches in. But yeah, Saturday night, back-to-back home games, and was out there at the training facility yesterday, John. I don't know who this person is. You might, and then we'll wrap it up. I was told the number one YouTuber in the world was at the SDFC training facility yesterday. Do you know who that is?
Number one YouTuber in the world. I'm assuming not Mr. Beast. That would be too easy. Is it Speed? Was Speed there?
It wasn't Speed. It's somebody who's actually from San Diego. I'm trying to find his name here real quick.
Was it Jordan?
They did kind of like an April Fool's thing where they're like, hey, we've made a signing. And
Jordan the Stallion, he's from Oceanside.
I'm always like, should I know who this is? And like, I think the answer is probably no.
I mean, if I don't know who he is, I know we're old guys, but I spend all my time online. I bump into these people all the time. Some of them.
I know. I always feel like I'm so out of the loop on stuff. sometimes. And I actually talked to somebody who works for the team. And I was like, is it okay if I just focus on the football here? Like, or do you need me to know who these YouTubers are? Let's see. I have his name here. Hold on. I'm scrolling. I'll get it. Okay. I don't want to leave the audience hanging.
No, it's
FaZe, F-A-Z-E, Rug? FaZe Rug?
FaZe Rug.
Yeah. Apparently this is a guy who's got like 25 million streams on YouTube. I don't really even know what that means.
Darren, I've never seen this guy before in my life.
Right. Well, he was out there yesterday. So
awesome.
And I felt like I should have. I was like, somebody's like, oh yeah, this guy's here, and I was like, oh yeah. One of those kind of conversations. You're like, should I know? Or like, I was super excited to walk out of it. I was like, I just talked to Patty McNair.
Did he have an Irish accent?
Oh, of course.
Hell yeah.
Of course. I asked him questions too. I was like, hey, what's it like, coming from the climate where you grew up in Ireland and then living in Manchester and Sunderland, and hearing all the sunshine. He's like, I have seen the sun before, And I asked him like how difficult it was getting used to driving on the right side of the road, right? Since every place where he's lived in his life, he drives on the opposite side. He's like, I have done that before on vacation. He's like, I'm not as, you didn't just pull me out of the woods here.
Not his first time. I have
had some experience with some of this stuff.
Not his first time.
But yeah, I feel like I'm so out of it sometimes when it comes to, who the influencers are and the YouTubers are. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just kind of here for the football. Like, what's our formation? What are our tactics going to be like this week?
There's only so much time and energy we can put into every single day. If I spent time staying up on who the top YouTubers were in the world, I would have less time to watch the Padres.
Well, John, that's what we're counting on you for, all this sort of stuff. So.
All right, fine. I'll stop watching the Padres. I'll start watching YouTubers.
All right. And lastly, we'll just wrap it up by saying thank you to everybody who has subscribed. I know lots of people are still new to this. And, John and I think we'll expand on this probably in the next couple of shows that we do here on Section 1904. But some of you are still new to this. You're like, oh, wow, cool. These guys are doing a podcast. Our plan is to see, what the interest is in a 100% listener supporter podcast. We got great reaction right out of the gate. We would love it if you would sign up, subscribe. John and I have, as we said to each other via text, maybe like 0.001% of what it is that we actually plan to do with this podcast. So, there's still, I feel overwhelmed at times with how much we still have to do.
Same.
But, we do appreciate, if you're listening to this, we are approaching this with a model that is going to be subscription based. There's reasons for that, which we will explain in greater detail when we have more time.
Yep.
But, that's what our plan is. So if you're enjoying it and you want to throw us a $5, you want to throw us a fin, we certainly would appreciate that, whatever it is that you could. None of this, we're still going through it ourselves, trying to pick up the consistency. So this is 3 straight days that we've had a podcast out. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's conversation with Richard Deitch. I thought we were going to expand on some of that, on the role of Twitter and whether we need Twitter to promote this project that we're doing. But we had a great conversation with him. But yeah, if you're new to it and you're listening to it and you want to subscribe to it and you want to support it, that's the only way that we're gonna be able to do this. We're committing to a period of time where it's free for everybody, and then we'll see what the world looks like and what our universe looks like at the end of it. So thank you to those that have already done it, and we appreciate those that will do it again in the future. So that being said, are we podding tomorrow?
Yeah, I will be here in my hotel room podding with you for 1 hour out of my vacation day.
All right. Well, sounds good. We will end on that note. I'm off to Shakespeare's to watch the Copa del Rey, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and then watch a little bit of the Padres. So we'll see you tomorrow, Thursday, on Section 1904.